Changes in store for the 2024 Paris Games as the International Olympic Committee is shaking up rules about transgender athlete participation in the Games. Rather than basing everything off of hormone levels, Olympic chiefs have decided they're going to leave the final decision to the governing body of each sport, encouraging category qualifiers. The new guidelines will also take mental health into account and exhaust the idea that eligibility should be primarily focused on gender identity, physical appearance, and sex variations. With that, the IOC claims it will no longer pressure athletes to undergo specific treatments to meet eligibility criteria, such as surgeries or other medications. Riley Gaines is a former NCAA swimmer who had competed against Leah Thomas during her time in college and is with us now. Riley, welcome. Thanks so much for coming on. What do you think about these changes to the IOC?
I think it leaves things fuzzy. It proves that the IOC is lacking accountability, just like everyone else in this country, starting from the top at our president, who is actively trying to rewrite Title IX. There's this theme of lack of ownership, lack of accountability, and not wanting to take responsibility. Clearly, they're acknowledging that fairness in women's sports is important. That's, of course, why the women's category was protected. But they're also wanting us to be inclusive and promote and encourage this diversity at the expense of female athletes and their mental health.
Right. It's fuzzy. I think that's a good way of describing it, because, again, if it's going category by category with different requirements, you're going to have to check which sports you'd like to qualify for. And I know you swam in college, so you have experience in the pool competing against, of course, female athletes, but then we've covered your competition against Leah Thomas, a biological male identifying as a female and allowed to compete in the NCAA. Riley, tell me about what that experience was like, and then what this policy for NCAA swimmers in particular could mean for future qualifications for maybe the Olympics.
So in my instance, in the case of Leah Thomas as a male was ranking in the 500s, 600s in the men's category, which of course is nowhere near qualifying for the NCAA championships, not even a year later winning a national title on the women's side. So the information to realize that this is blatantly obvious and unfair and wrong is right in front of our faces. And clearly these organizations are choosing to ignore it. But I am fortunate that in swimming, FINA has now announced that unless you have started taking puberty blockers, hormone suppression by the age of 12 before you go through puberty, then you will not be allowed to swim in any category at the Olympics other than the one that your birth certificate says, which is a great first step. Of course, there's some flaws within the guidelines. Even asking 12-year-olds to take any sort of hormone suppression is totally insane. But I think it's insane enough that people hopefully won't do it, and it protects the women's category for a bit longer.
Sure. Tell me about what it's been like working with your teammates now. I understand you've graduated, right? So what's it been like to sort of reflect on what it was like for you to be so outspoken during your time in college about how uncomfortable you felt and how unfair you thought it was that biological males would be in the same swimming pool as you?
Well, I'm realizing how much I took Title IX for granted. Of course, Title IX was created half a century ago, 50 years ago, which to me seems like a long time ago. But in reality, it's not that long ago. Just 50 years ago, there was no category for women, and people weren't given the same opportunity that I had, that I took for granted. But now, seeing biological men infiltrate back into the women's category, I realize how crazy it is that people aren't willing to acknowledge that women deserve privacy in our locker rooms. We deserve safety in our sports. We deserve equal and fair competition, and we deserve to maintain our dignity within these sports. And so I'm realizing that I took that for granted, and I hate that, because I'm seeing the people who fought so hard for Title IX. And it seems that we're going to have to do that again. We need more female athletes to step up, but female athletes around the country are being silenced. They're being intimidated, they're being threatened, they're being emotionally blackmailed by their universities. And so I cannot stress the importance of using your voice and being able and willing to speak out about this, because if we as young female athletes aren't willing to stick up for ourselves, we can't expect other people to.
It's a brave voice that you've got, and it's a powerful one. Riley, earlier in the program, we spoke to a Connecticut athlete. She ran track and field. And we've just learned in Connecticut, a federal appeals court had rejected a challenge, basically saying they wanted to overturn the transgender policy in school. They wanted a fair playing field. They wanted to not only compete, but have a fair chance at actually winning the competition. So again, in Connecticut, the policy remains in place. If you identify as a certain gender, you can compete in that category. Again, I'm summarizing it here. You can dive into the details. But what's that like as you look at states all across the country and how they view transgender athlete participation? How does that make you feel?
It just makes you feel like even at your best, you're not good enough. While you might be a great woman, there's a better woman, and in fact, this woman is a biological male. I feel like these past 50 years that Title IX was in place, we had advanced and we had progressed. And I think that's the problem, is that the left and this woke culture we live in, they think we are being progressive. They think we are moving forward by introducing these policies or upholding these policies. But this is not progressive. This is regressive. And so to know there are places in this country that don't value the physical limits that a woman's body has, it's so disheartening. It feels like a slap in the face. I think there's simply no medical professional whose expertise is in physiological development, especially within sports, who would disagree that there are no advantages biologically between men and women when it comes to sports. And so to have these courts uphold decisions like this, claiming that it's backed in science and research and evidence and data, and that's just false. There's dozens of peer-reviewed articles and journals that state even with hormone suppression, the differences between men and women will never be mitigated.
Yeah, it's biology, right? At this point, you're denying it. Riley Gaines, thank you so much for coming on, using your voice. We appreciate it. Happy holidays to you.
Of
Merry
course.
Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Thank you.